All right. Welcome. This is actually really funny because little do you guys know, but I actually just said a whole bunch of stuff already, but I totally didn't click the go live button. So I'm going to say it all again here. Got myself a nice, fresh, frosty Terrapin Hopsecutioner. Very fine beer. One of my faves, I would say. And, I might have said some secret information. There might have been some secret stuff. Uh-oh. Am I good? Maybe. I'll just keep talking. I'll just keep talking through it. Modulated. Here, maybe if I turn this down. What about now? Maybe that'll do a little bit better. I'm not sure. I don't know why it's doing that. It shouldn't be doing that. I don't like that it's being weird. Because anytime I try to mess with stuff, that's whenever I break something, and then everything just goes downhill. That's okay. We'll just do that, and we will... Very 80s synth vibes. That's awesome. It sounds like that? Right now? That's crazy. I literally have no idea. I should probably put in headphones, right? That's like what I'm supposed to do. That way I know exactly how I sound. I'm pretty sure that's what the pros would do. Oh shit, just throw some stuff on the floor. Nice. I have no idea why there would be synth vibes. I'm glad there is, honestly. What happens? Let's see if I can make it so I can hear myself. Or nice. I have no idea why there would be synth vibes. Oh, I do know why there might be synth vibes. I'm glad there is, honestly. Okay, let me turn off a thing. What happens? Let's see if I can make it so I can hear myself. Or nice. I have no idea why there would be synth vibes. Oh, I do know why there might be synth vibes. I'm glad there is, honestly. Okay, let me turn off a thing. What happens? Let's see if I can make it so I can hear myself. Is this any better? Or do a little check here. Nice. I have no idea why there would be synth vibes. Oh, I do know why there might be synth vibes. I'm glad there is, honestly. Okay, let me turn off a thing. What happens? Let's see if I can make it so I can hear myself. Is this any better? Ah, we did it. Okay. Super cool. Sorry about that. Thanks for tolerating all of that up until now. I have no idea why there would be synth vibes. But okay, let's get down to business. Let's talk about some cool stuff. I have a lot of cool things planned. Oh man, I have a lot of cool things planned for this time here, Decomposing Live, because today I really want to hear about. Let's talk about it here. I really want to hear about that time you almost died in the woods. All right. I really would love to hear about that. I want to talk about wilderness adventures some more. That's always kind of a theme that sort of comes up. It's something that, I kind of end up doing a lot of, is being outside and doing stuff and having adventures that take place outdoors in strange locales and things like that. But let's talk about it. Let's talk about it for real, maybe, you know? It doesn't have to be about a time that you almost died in the woods, because that's really dark, and maybe we don't all have that experience. I'm not really sure if I've had a time where I almost died. I mean, there's definitely, like, probably some dangerous woodland-related activities that I probably shouldn't have been doing, but, you know, I would have made it out okay, even if things went worse than what they did. So I really want to hear about everybody else's, though, right? That's what interests me, because I know you guys probably got some good ones. And on top of that, I want to hear about one of your favorite wilderness adventures in a game that you played, right? Preferably like a tabletop RPG, but if it's some other game or something, I'm totally down to hear about that too. And then I would like to tell you guys a little bit about some GNS theory, right? So GNS theory is kind of like an interesting sort of thing. Like if you do any kind of role-playing game stuff, right? There's this thing called GNS theory that happens. Sort of in there. Right? GNS. Boom, boom, boom. Let's do another one. I need a whole new document already. I just need another thing already here. So, there we go. GNS theory. So, if you don't know about GNS, right, this stands for Gamism. How gamey is your game? This stands for narrativism. Oops. And this stands for simulationism. Oh man. Oh, I should go back to school. And what's really interesting about GNS theory is that, you know, according to this, whenever you play something like Dungeons and Dragons or anything like that, you're not really just playing one game. You're actually sort of playing 3 games simultaneously. And that's kind of wild. It's kind of a crazy thing to think about. So we want to get to there where we're talking about this stuff and how looking at this particular model can help us do some planning for our games. And then we can talk about some Rime of the Frost Maiden stuff. I just want to talk about the intro adventures. I didn't get to read as much of it as I would have liked, but I did sort of read like the first little bit to kind of get the gist of what you do in the first section. And I think I can talk about it without really spoiling anything. And that'll be a lot of fun. So we can talk about how we're going to apply our GNS theory to Rime of the Frost Maiden, all right? But first, if you haven't cracked your beer yet, make sure you get one. Make sure you do that, because I am going to totally really drink a lot of these. I'm thinking you're going to drink a lot of Hopsecutioner right now. Let's see. Oh, man. Cool. So, that time that you almost died in the woods, though. Let's talk about that. So, first of all, I'll share a little story with you guys. I was probably like, I don't know, 13 or 14 or something like that. And I was playing out in the woods with some friends, right? Let's go back. Where's my title? I was playing out in the woods with some friends, and we were just kind of like running around in the woods as you do, and we happened upon sort of like a big, I don't want to really call it a cave. We called it a cave at the time, but it really wasn't. It might have been a cave. I don't know. It was sort of like a cave. There was like a big ass rock, and there was like a hole in the ground that would definitely like take you underneath this big rock. And like, you know, the rock is like huge. It's like a big hill, mountain. It's not really a mountain. Man, I describe stuff way better when I'm playing D&D, that's for sure. But there's a big rock, and then there's like a tunnel that we can see that would go underneath said rock. But in the way of the rock was this was like a big boulder, kind of like sealing the entrance, sort of. So to like go down in that hole, to be able to like fit down in it, we had to move this rock first. And so we started getting like really into it. There was probably like 5 or 6 of us, and we're all like trying to move around this rock, and it's really big. We couldn't even really make it budge. We like pulled down a big branch and like tried to make a lever because we heard about that in like, 8th grade science class or something. And we were trying to like really push and pull and just move this thing out of the entrance so that we could get down into the into this cave, right? And eventually, like, we kind of got to the point where we could like get past the rock, and we could have totally went down into the cave, but then it was like we just didn't. The time in the woods just became about moving this boulder, moving this boulder out of the way. And we must have, I don't know how long we spent. We like dug around it too. We did like every possible thing that we could, like, to try to figure out a way to move this stone. And then it just sort of ended a little bit. There was like, the big turn of events, like, and at any time too, like when we were standing around this boulder, like we were down in the hole too, trying to like move this boulder. If it had like rolled back onto one of us, it would have like broken our legs or like crushed our knees into dust or something like that. Like we would just be like, what's his name? What's the dude's name in the Goonies where they find him? Chester Copperpot. Pow. We would have been like Chester Copperpot, but like not even near any treasure. Just crushed in like underneath a stupid rock in the woods, right? Everything kind of came to this closing when my one buddy just sort of had these like firecrackers, right? He had like the fun kind. The fun kind, they're like all on a strip, and they're all like, it's like all a bunch of little sticks all like woven together by like a fuse. And you throw them in there and they go like pop, 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 or like those ones. And he threw those like down into the hole, right? And they just go off, and it's like bah, 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 bah. And then we are like standing there for like half a second, and then a giant ass bat just flies up out of the hole and like starts swooping around us, and we just run away like a bunch of children. And that was that. That was literally how that went. So, it was kind of funny. It's just like weird whenever you look back on certain times like that. But just thinking about that sense of just doing things like that, hanging out with your friends in the woods, going on what feels like some kind of big adventure, but now whenever I tell it back, it doesn't seem like a whole lot. That's been the inspiration for several games, several things, some different stories that I've written and things like that. So it's kind of funny how those little happenings like that go on and then inspire you much later on. Does anybody else want to? Yeah, man, we got some people in the pod being here. Does anybody else got a time that they almost died in the woods story that they would like to share? If you want to call in, you got to have headphones. I know it's kind of crazy. But then I think you just push that call in button, and we've never done it before. I've never done it, so I tried the one time and I messed up real bad, kind of like always. But if somebody wants to call in, let's talk about it. Let's talk about some time that you had a really good time journeying in the woods with your friends, or you almost died, or I don't know, something along those lines. Nothing? Alright. Well, if you decide you guys want to come in and share your tale, I would certainly love to hear it. Oh, God. Oh, yeah. Wood story. Okay, when I was at the summer camp, as a Boy Scout, there was a kid who was in my group doing the fishing merit badge. We're all fishing off this rocky outcropping over a creek when this kid out say, look what I found. Oh, God. Oh, no. Just throws the copperhead. Yeah, man. That's crazy. That's like, and that's way more dangerous than a bat, I would say. Like, that's at least a copperhead for sure is totally like at least a CR half encounter, right? Like, you know, in D&D terms. I think he probably gained at least, you know, 200 or 300 experience for that. Oh my god. Oh man. Stomped on the snake. That's really wild, man. If you guys aren't hearing Wings Above's story right now in the chat, this is really good. I'm all about this. I mean, I feel bad for the snake, but that's just like crazy. Copperheads, man, nothing to mess with. But apparently, if you're that kid, I guess it's okay. It's real wild. Any callers? All right. Pissed off. Oh, nice. Yeah. Wow. That is some wild stuff, Wings Above. I'm into it. Definitely need some more. There was definitely a good snake incident in Lands Above on Saturday. If you didn't hear about it, it's the milk vipers. I've been calling them milk vipers a lot. You know, Ryan might be able to tell you about the milk vipers. It was pretty intense. But going on, let's talk a little bit more. Can get kind of crazy here. Talk about the G and the GNS. And so we got gameism, right? Oh man, gameism, right? So what is gameism? Gameism is like the easy one. Gameism is sort of the easiest part because, especially for new people, because it's the part that sort of makes a game into a game, right? It's the rolling the dice, it's the character sheets, it's the math. That's gameism, right? So when we talk about gameism, right, we want to think about all the things like probabilities, right? That's definitely part of this. Oh, then we want to think about things like modifiers, dice, right? Really all of the like systems, and I'm doing air quotes right now, right? The system aspect of the game is gameism, and it's the most obvious. Like I said, with GNS, it's sort of like you're playing 3 games all at once. Whenever you play Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder or any RPG where you're also rolling dice and your characters have stats, you're playing at least 3 games all at the same time here, right? Get a nice little D6 here going. Nice little box. Should go back to drawing school. Learn how to draw a cube. Oh. Right. So. Boop, 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 boop. Yeah, gameism, right? So this is like the kind of thing that comes up where it's like, you can probably remember when you started playing D&D or something, and someone like asks if you're winning, right? It's like, can you really win at D&D? And I think a gamist would say, hell yeah, you can win at D&D. You got to kill every monster in the monster manual, right? And then you win the game. That's definitely how it's played, I'm pretty sure. No, you could look at it that way, but it extends to a lot of the other things, right? And some people, after you've been playing for like a really long time, they start to just kind of like frown at this idea of like gameism, and like they're like, ugh, the dice. Sometimes we play whole games and we don't even touch the dice. And you know, that's a thing, and that's really cool. It's super fun. I've definitely been parts of games with very minimal dice rolling, and it's been totally fun, and I've ran games that where people were enjoying the other aspects, the other two parts of the game enough that they didn't need this third part, right? They didn't need the dice, they didn't need the mechanics, they didn't need the systems. But I think what we want to try to do is, you want to try to manage all three of these games happening at the same time. Combat, right? So combat, beep, oop. Combat, in my opinion, is probably where you really see the big game, the big side of gamism, right? This is happening in combat. Most of Dungeons and Dragons, up until really, that's not necessarily true, I guess. 5th edition is where they started to like really kind of break away from stuff, but you're starting to really see a lot more of the role playing bits integrated whenever they have things like flaws and bonds and things for your background and different things like that. But if you look at like 4th edition, your entire character sheet is built around you fighting a monster. Or monsters, right? Having an encounter and doing battle. None of that stuff really has anything to do with role playing or even like narrative stuff. That's all stuff that you as a game master have to kind of tack on the side if you wanted it to happen in 4th edition. I think 3rd edition, that was also really true because there were so many things like feats and things that made you better at combat, right? Definitely had this in Pathfinder a lot as well, where it's all just really driven towards you being good at fighting stuff, right? Occasionally you solve a situation with other means, like some kind of like skill check or something like that, which is really in a lot of ways just kind of an extension of combat sometimes, right? You gotta climb up the wall to get to the next thing that you're gonna fight. Or me and one of my friends, we were just joking about this the other day. It's like really it's all about that combat, right? Like all the other checks are just there so you get to the next part where you can have combat, right? Like I gotta make a perception roll to figure out when I'm gonna have the next combat, and I gotta roll my investigation to find out where I'm going to have the next combat, and I roll my history check so I know a little bit more about what I'm fighting, and I roll my nature check to figure out the possible bait for the thing that I'm going to fight, and it all kind of really revolves around that, and that's a really like sort of gamist focused thing, and that's totally fine, right? Sometimes it's definitely one of the 3 games that are being played. Let's go on to the next one, though. Boop. Keep going here. So now we talked about the gamism. Let's talk a little bit about... Oh, what do we want to talk about next? Let's talk about narrativism. I hope I spell it right. Narrativism. All right. Narrativism is really an interesting one, okay? Because a lot of the time, for narrativism, this is what people think of when we talk about, like, whenever we say RPG, right? Whenever we say role-playing, right? They think that, like, role-playing is part of narrativism. And it's really not, right? Not RP. Okay? Narrativism is the overarching story, right? Narrativism is like this, right? Yes, last time whenever we talked about our arcs and stuff, that is narrativism, right? And that's another part of the game, right? Part of the game is the overarching story that is taking place, and potentially like your influence in this overarching story that is happening. Okay? Narrativism, in my opinion, is what's going to get everybody playing a game for like long times. There was just some kind of, it kept popping up in my Facebooks, Somebody had like an article where someone had been running the same game for like 38 years or something crazy like that. 38 years is a long time to be running one game, right? And it's not uncommon to hear like these like grognard people, these old school gamers. They talk about their games that last like 20 years, 15 years, stuff like that. I know personally, like, I was involved in a game that went on for probably close to 10 years, something like that, which is pretty awesome, right? It was so much fun. And I know for a fact that one of the things that made that work, why it went on so long, is because of the narrativism. The idea that there is an overarching story that you get to be a part of and potentially influence, right? So big advantages of focusing on your narrativism is going to be like tying your players to the game, getting them involved, making them like want to come back week to week to the same characters. Yeah, thank you. Exactly. That game that I was in that lasted a long time was called Fire and Ice, ran by Sam, who's up here in the chat. Super good one. We started when we were probably like 14. Not the same people though that I was in the woods with. We had our own separate times in the woods and things, sword fighting and doing other crazy stuff. But yeah, that was the long running game, probably the longest running game that I was involved in. It was super awesome, right? Definitely a campaign for the ages. Really fun stuff. And what kept it going is that really cool narrative arc, right? Just watching our characters grow and seeing the story evolve and wanting to fight like the next monster. And also we were younger too, so we had like less real world obligations, and we could meet up more frequently and just hang out and game for like 15 hours and straight and stuff like that. Do those big marathon games that you can only do whenever you're in like high school. But let's talk about some of the drawbacks, right? So whenever we hear this thing of narrativism, like, that all sounds great and good, right? We hear this big overarching story, and it's like, oh man, we all want that. We want to be a part of that. We need to make that happen. But one thing that we dread, or should sort of be dreaded a little bit, is the railroad. Dun dun dun. Right, the railroad. You guys, is everybody familiar with the railroad? So what the railroad is like, that's whenever your game master is just sort of like stringing you along and you're kind of stuck on their path, right? You have very little agency as a player, or you don't get to change that stuff, okay? You don't feel like you have influence in the world. And I'm going to go ahead and say that not all railroads are bad, right? If you are awesome, if you're a really good storyteller, like if you have a world and a plot and something that is just so great, then you can totally run railroads and it's going to be awesome, right? People will enjoy it every single time, right? They don't need to have these big like character influencing things if your story is good enough. Or they will still be fulfilled as players by listening to your story. But I will say that very few people are that good at telling a story, or making a story so good that it compensates for lacking the other two sides of the game that are happening. Okay? Like, it just doesn't happen, right? People come into D&D because they want to influence the world that they're playing in, not necessarily because they want to be read a story. To some people, being read a story as D&D sounds like a lot more appealing than it does to others. And again, it's totally fine. Everybody's going to have their own preferences. But I think one of the things that we should be striving for is, how are we going to play all three games at once as successfully as possible, right? So the railroad, something to be dreaded. And it also kind of comes in with this thing where it's like, you have this big issue of determinism, right? Or like, it almost feels like it's like the argument of free will or something like that, right? Like nothing that you do can really affect anything. So it's like, why am I even playing? So that's kind of the problem with going too far down this narrativism path. Is it strips away the player's agency, and they just they don't even want to play their characters. They're just kind of there to roll dice and see if they do good during like the fights. But sometimes it's like, if your game master is going so far as to not let you fail, or the flip side of that, to not let you succeed in certain parts of the story, then it's like it's really taking a lot away from the players, right? When you're fighting those encounters that you just can't win. And I know I've totally ran like a bunch of encounters where like I wanted the PCs to die, and so I can do some kind of crazy thing where they come back in the afterlife and they all have to go on like a secret mission to do blah blah blah. And it was all for this like greater big part of the plot. But looking back on it, there is much better ways for me to have done that or explain that concept or anything than that, rather than just breaking the rules to the point where, like, for the sake of the story, right? Some people are going to be like, you should break the rules for the sake of the story, but also you got to be careful doing that sometimes, right? That's going to piss off your people who are all about the gameism, right? Whenever you start bending the rules for the sake of the story, it starts to make things fall apart, right? There's this interconnectedness between the three games that are happening, right? So it's like, as you break the gameism rules, then now like people become less interested. It feels like much less authentic that story is happening, right? Part of the reason that it's so cool that you get these long running stories is that interesting dice rolls and happenings came up that allowed them to happen by the laws of the game. Next one. This is the one. Simulationism. Right? So simulationism. Now this is your role playing right here. Role playing, right? This is like, you hear Dungeons and Dragons and stuff, and man, this is what everybody came to do, is do some role playing right here. Pow 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 pow, bing bing bing. But sometimes role playing really gets in the way of stuff. Okay, we can talk about that. Let's talk about the good side of simulationism first, right? Simulationism is like the character side of the story, right? It's their ability to be placed in the situation, and then they act as their characters, right? They simulate being somebody else in a another world, and they get to do whatever it is they want to do, right? This is all about their agency and the actions that they're taking, and yeah, it's super fun, right? It's really enjoyable, right? It's the escapism sort of part of it. It's, in my opinion, one of the things that will always kind of keep Dungeons and Dragons ahead of things like video games and stuff, is that as we all just kind of like interact with each other, right? You just kind of like keep forging the story and making things happen, and you don't rely on this preset information that is something like a computer game. Computers, role playing. What is it? Yeah, good shortcomings, examples. Good simulationism is like, this is like whenever you get like characters interacting with each other, and they're just sort of like talking back and forth for a while, and they're just enjoying playing their characters. I think that's really like peak, it's peak role playing. That's peak simulationism. That's exactly what you want, is that feeling that everybody has just been talking as their character for like the last hour and a half, and you're still getting a lot of stuff done, and it's very fun. So it's super enjoyable. But there are some things that definitely go wrong with simulationism. Simulationism, whenever you have those moments where everybody's talking in character and carrying on, simulationism can be slow, right? If you want to role play out every single encounter, whoo, buddy, like my least favorite thing. I used to love it, and I'll still do it every once in a while, right? If there's like an important NPC that needs to be introduced or something, like maybe they, maybe the PCs are gonna see a lot of them, or maybe they have like they want a quest to go on, or they're just there's somebody who's important to the overarching narrative, right? They're important in the narrative side of things. Then yeah, I'll role play as like the shopkeeper or some kind of like NPC or something like that. But like I remember playing in some campaigns where it's like we're gonna role play out every single item that you're gonna buy at the store, and you're gonna like try to, you know, like trick the shopkeeper and do all this sort of stuff. Like that can be fun as like a one-off kind of thing, as like an encounter. But like every single time we're gonna play haggle with the merchant, and then like gotta haggle whenever they make your items, and you try to like swindle them out of something else. It just like really starts to bog everything down, and it's only ever going to be fun for the person who is like immediately involved in that scene, right? It's cool if everybody's doing it together and they're all in on that, but if it's just like one player trying to get their magic ring forged or something like that from the enchanting wizard who makes rings, and it's just one player interacting with the dungeon master, and it's this big RP thing. Ooh, buddy, like everybody else is going to be kind of like, I'm good. Like let's go do the gamism part. Let me hear the part where we get the big reveal, and it's like the next part of the narrative, right? So you got to like balance out simulationism a lot and choose the things that you want to simulate. Oh man, yeah. I'm sorry, dude. Trying to do the pod bean. I don't know. Were you trying to call in there, Dom? It just says it doesn't like your headphones. Because I don't know if it was like making a sound or something, and I just like didn't click on you to like activate you or something. Like I actually don't know what happens when somebody hits the call in button. I don't know if it rings or if it like notifies me in some way. I've got no idea, but I'd love to find out. But yeah, definitely share your almost died story, because I know you've got a good one. Um, Simulationism other times where this can go awry and kind of crazy is doing something like tracking supplies, right? If you're tracking supplies by their exact weight, and like in the player's handbook, and you have to keep track of all that, that's a great example of like simulationism. You're trying to really make it seem exactly like this thing that's going on is exactly as it would be, and you have your encumbrance all marked out to the very like last piece of chalk that you've chosen to take with you in your bag. Whew, that's just a lot of work. Maybe that could be another part, like another kind of drawback of the simulationism. It's a lot of work. Bookkeeping. But it does really make you feel like you're there, right? It's definitely an integral part of playing an RPG, right? Especially something like Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder, right? So all at the same time, we're really playing beep, beep, beep. We're playing 3 games over top of each other. Okay, you have the game of rolling the dice and tracking your stats and losing hit points and gaining levels, right? You have someone who is telling you an interesting story where you're going, You're traveling to strange places and meeting exciting people and fighting strange monsters and taking their gold and gaining experience from it, right? That's the narrativism, and then you have like the simulationism side of it, which is like the actual things that you do, that you act out, that influence the story, that are a part of that then make up the story, right? That are a part of your character, right? So all three of those happen at the same time. So let's talk about Rime of the Frost Maiden. Okay. Let's see what Dom's... I want to read Dom's wood story here. Alright. So Dom's going to send us his almost died in the wood story that I'm excited to hear about. Please send it in. And Rime of the Frost Maiden. Okay. So Rime of the Frost Maiden... of the Frost Maiden. What it opens up with is a place called 10 Towns, right? And this isn't really a spoiler at all, because you will find this out immediately, like, upon opening up the book, right? If you really don't want to hear it, then just drink your beer louder to yourself and keep listening, okay? So 10 Towns is exactly what it sounds like. It's these 10 towns, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Hey, let's put one in the middle. 10, right? And you get this nice fold-out map that shows all of these. And the idea is that there's something going on at each one of these places, right? So you have to, like, in the first part of the game here, you're traveling between these places a whole lot, right? Boom, right? They're all just weaving over top of each other, and they're all like pretty closely, evenly spaced out. I think it's like 7 or 8 hours usually of travel between each one, so like roughly about a day's worth of travel between each town. And a lot of stuff can happen, right? Because it's like this frozen tundra, and these people are just kind of like scraping by in these little like villages there, surviving in various ways, having like just crazy times, getting by, dealing with the Frost Maiden. And it's pretty bonkers, right? So how would you run this? That's what I want to talk about. I want to look at our three approaches here. I want to look at our gameism, our narrativism, and our simulationism. And I want to talk about three quick little strategies to, three different approaches to running this kind of game where you're marching between 10 towns, right? So first, let's take a look at gameism, right? So the gamist approach to traveling between these three towns is going to be completely based on your dice rolls, right? Let your players' survival checks do the talking, right? Make them throw those survival rolls. Depending on how well they do, a simple way to handle this travel, right? You could just treat survival almost like a saving throw in that regard, right? You all make your survival rolls, and if you do good, you take less damage than if you do bad, right? And you just take a general amount of damage for traveling between the towns just because it's cold weather and sleeping, or it could be like some damage and like a level of exhaustion. It could be something along those lines, right? That would be like the gamist sort of approach. Big advantages there is that is super fast, right? Really quick, right? You don't have to spend a lot of time doing that, and that means you can get to the missions like faster, right? You can hit these places up. It's almost like a like a jump cut, you know. You show everybody just kind of hanging out, being really cold and having a hard time camping, and then boom, you're in the next part of 10 towns. Before we go on to our next approach here, let's look what Dom has for us here. I was at a friend's camp for a summer holiday weekend. The weather had been very rainy, so the Allegheny River was way up, moving about 11 miles per hour. Saw a bunch of debris floating down the river and decided it needed to investigate. Exactly, dude. I had a few beers, but it was still midday, so I was by no means incapacitated. I was, however, much large for the kayak. I launched into the river. Oh, gosh. About midstream, reached the raft, floated some jetsam, had a momentary hiccup and lost my... Oh, no. Dude, yeah, you can't... Kayaking is crazy. It seems like a recipe for disaster, right? I hope there's more. I hope there's more coming, Dom. After we talk about 10 towns here, I'm going to roll through this. We should probably talk about the GNS theory of Dom's kayak mishap. Right? That'll come next. Right? How can we how can we best play out this kayaking misadventure, and also the Copperhead encounter? That's a really good encounter, right? Where you just have like somebody who's like is just like a kid or something doing something really stupid, so like you can't hurt the kid, right? But then like they're also doing something that is like spectacularly dangerous, like throwing a live snake into a crowd of people. That's pretty fun. That's interesting. It's about midstream. Came up, recovered, but now was in a situation. In my panic, I decided I could abandon the kayak and attempt to swim to shore, which was the inside of the bank, bend of the river, but to no avail. Oh, man. As we finish, as Dom's story is coming in, we'll keep going here. So what is the narrativism approach to handling 10 towns here? Okay. This is just me kind of thinking right off the top of my head, but the narrativism approach to 10 towns is that you don't actually really care a whole lot about what happens from point A to point B, right? Like, you skip that because it's not the main story, right? Skip the travel. Which just means, boom, oh, you want to go from this little place here, you want to go from A to B here in the middle, well, boom, you're there, right? Let's go on. What's happening, right? And that would probably be like a good narrativism approach. I mean, if you wanted to make it like so that way you actually utilize this part of traveling in between, then you have it set hard and fast in your mind that they're going to meet somebody along the way in here who is going to tell you about something that is coming up in B, right? So they're like foreshadowing the events here, right? So you have this very like book-like encounter where you're traveling along like the icy trail with your dog sled team, which is definitely a very important part of Rime and the Frost Maiden. Sorry for the spoiler there, but dog sleds, man, it's totally awesome. And as you're traveling along with your team, you meet like a shady outcast figure who just is like wandering the frozen wastes between these villages, and he's going to like tell you something that you didn't know about the town that's up ahead, right? Which is cool, right? Definitely keeps that story moving, but maybe has a little bit less player interaction than what some of you guys would like, right? There's not enough stuff going on in there, right? So now, number 3 is going to be our simulation. All right. Simulation. Right here. The ultimate simulation would be to just like go outside and then walk somewhere for like 8 hours with your friends until it's taken the exact amount of time described in the book to get from point A to point B, and then talk as your characters along the way, right? That would definitely be the way to do it. If you wanted that peak simulationism, that's what you would want. But obviously, we don't want that. So what does that really mean at the table? It means we're going to track supplies. It means we're going to probably have like some kind of random encounter, right? That's kind of halfway between the gamism part, really. And at like every hour, the dungeon master should be asking like, what is your character doing for this hour? Or what is your character doing now? What about now? What's your character doing now? Right? That is kind of the ultimate simulationist question. What is your character doing? Right? Boom. I know it's super hard to read all that chicken scratch, guys, but I enjoy it. What is your character doing? That's the big simulationist question, is what I'm trying to say. And the obvious drawback is exactly what we said before, is it's slow. Okay? It's really cool. It's definitely like part of the game that I like, but it is not fast. So how do we take all of these three parts and combine them to get like the peak way of how we're gonna run this? Let's find out what happened in Dom's story. So, thankfully I grabbed a life vest, and some neighbors called River Rescue. Oh man, Jesus! And directed me to head out of the bank, which is a sheer climb. Long Dutch. It's a funny aside. They yelled out to me, "Do you need help?" I had to sit and wait for River Rescue to show up and rescue. Oh man, they were out using the inclement weather for practice and were generally... That's good. Concerned about the junk. Going to investigate. But I'm pretty sure it was just lost belongings and nothing more. Dang, dude. That's real crazy. I mean, that's like a super legit wilderness encounter, I would say. That is way more legit of a wilderness encounter than my firework bat story. So, I give that the... I think that still gets the Decomposing Live call-in award story for the week, for the chat story of the week. That can be a thing. Let's have that. So chat story of the week. I like the Copperhead story though too. It's really good. The Copperhead story is like really like, it's like an open-ended question. It's like, what do you do whenever like a kid throws a snake at you or something? I don't know. It's really interesting. It's a good mystery to unravel. But I like that Dom's story brings it to this kind of closure. That's also really important. But yeah. So combining these three things, that's what's gonna make the magic happen. Also, that's what my next video is gonna be about. Is going to be about these three topics in just like a more condensed kind of version. And we're going to talk about how when you start off as a dungeon master, you kind of start off at one of these 3 points, and then you kind of like level your way up and you move through these 3 phases, and then you're doing 2 of these phases, and then it's like you can always sort of look to the third thing that you're missing to help you gain experience as a dungeon master, right? I think, Dad, you don't necessarily need to balance all of these at once. Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point from Sam, right? You don't need to necessarily try to do all 3 of these things at the same time, right? And that's definitely one thing that I would like to talk about. I know that I've ran sessions like, you definitely want to try to hit some balance, right? Is probably a general sort of good rule, just like what we were talking about last time with pacing. And using these three things can give you like a nice sense of pacing. Like you put an emphasis on gameism, then you put an emphasis on narrativism, then you put an emphasis on simulationism, and as you kind of cycle through the three of those, you'll get that nice kind of up and down wave that we talked about last week. But I think that there are some tricks that, just by looking at them and becoming aware that those three things are out there, you can still try to like plan an encounter or plan a situation that sort of hits all three of these things, right? So like right off the top of my head, I know that I would want to use something that uses roles, right? I want to use this gameism thing where I'm using roles like survival, right? Or something else. I know that I need to have an overarching story here, right? They at least need to know that the story is going to advance when they get to B. But maybe I have something kind of on the back burner, like this strange man, like some kind of nice little twist. Someone who's going to show up to tell them something that they didn't know before, right? And the simulationism part of that is just going to be getting the players to act and think of like what their character would do, right? And what's your character doing? But a cool way that we can do that and sort of blend that together with the idea of rolling is you could have everybody roll survival, right? I could be like, okay, we're all going to see how well you fare as you travel from town A to town B. Roll your survival check. Okay? And that would be one way to do it. But another way to do it, where you would combine the simulationist side with the gaming side, is to be like, give your characters that agency and say like, okay, tell me what your character does that is going to help them get from point A to point B, right? So now, rather than everybody all rolling the same thing and some people are good and some people are bad at it, everybody gets to try to like think of a thing that they want to use that their character might do that would help them along the way, right? So it's like you have one character who's going to be the lookout, so they're going to make a perception roll to help ensure that everybody gets safely from A to B. You say maybe someone wants to throw that nature roll to help look for edible roots and berries, or things like that, right? Or just sort of like some kind of like natural area where it would be safe to camp along the way, safe to rest. You have someone who is going to throw investigation because they're going to scout up ahead and make sure that there's nothing weird up there. You have people who are going to roll just like maybe somebody's just going to roll athletics because they're super strong and they're actually going to just help pull the dog sled, right? Maybe someone's going to roll medicine to help treat the animals, or animal handling, I guess. Animal handling, right? They're going to make sure that the dog sled team's doing well. So that's like an interesting way that we can take this simulationism and then blend it in there with our gameism, and then also just kind of like keeping our narrativism in mind and balancing those out, right? So now you're involving the players, you're moving the story forward. The players are now actually telling the story because they're saying what their characters are going to do that's going to help them get from A to B, and they're making rolls about it, right? And from the rolls you get the results, and the results are going to tell you whether they pass or fail. And again, that's going in, heightening the story. They meet their little twist along the way, and this guy tells them that the butcher in the next town is actually an ice doppelganger or something like that, and that he wants to steal everybody's bone marrow or something like that, whatever doppelgangers want to do in the frozen north. Or maybe he just wants to hang out, right? Maybe he's just like trying to be really cool. But so that's some basic kind of my introduction to GNS theory. I didn't make that up, right? It's some guy did. some other person who thought about this stuff way more than me. came up with these three terms, but and a lot of people have built games all just thinking off of these three things. Namely, I think the guy that wrote Apocalypse World, right? Vincent Baker, I'm pretty sure, is like a big advocate of this GNS theory sort of stuff. And I think that, I think there might be more to it. There's definitely some other stuff going on. But anytime you're playing an RPG, a tabletop RPG, there's at least these three separate games happening. So we want to think about those things and plan for them. And thank you, everybody, for sharing your wilderness stories. I appreciate them. They were awesome. Very inspiring. I think we should talk about them more next time. And yeah, gang, that hour flew by. That went super fast this time. So thanks for sticking around and listening. I deeply appreciate it. If you haven't, I gotta say it. I feel stupid kind of saying it, but I gotta say it. Hit that like and subscribe, guys. Please, it'd be super cool to see us get to like 50 subscribers. That would be pretty sick. So thanks, everybody. Keep decomposing. Talk to you all soon.